we start with hopes of victory in the trade war. Stocks soaring into the close. The Dow jumping more than 170 points. The Nasdaq closing at a record high. The S&P 500 now within a hair of its record high. Let's get to Kayla Tausche in D.C. with the very latest details. Kayla.
Melissa, after several hours behind closed doors, delegations from the U.S. and the European Union hammered out an agreement to begin a dialogue to talk about lowering tariffs across the board for non-auto industrial goods, in the president's words. They are going to talk about sending more U.S. soybeans and natural gas to Europe. And according to President Trump, in response to that, each side will lay down the weapons that they've been using in this trade war.
We also will resolve the steel and aluminum tariff issues, and we will resolve retaliatory tariffs. We have some tariffs that are retaliatory, and that will get resolved as part of what we're doing.
According to the European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, who spoke just after the president, he said that so long as both sides continue negotiating, there will be no new tariffs put in place. That would seem to suggest that the U.S. will not go forward with auto tariffs that the president has been suggesting to punish Europe for unfair trade, as he sees it, in the auto industry. We will see whether that is actually how this trade negotiation plays out, because I heard from a European Commission spokesperson right around the time that the two leaders were speaking and asked about the trade deal specifically. She said no concessions are made, and essentially this is a deal to keep talking. But for now, Melissa, this is good news for the market. It buys the U.S. and Europe some time to work out their differences without having this play out in real time and with real business at stake.
To be clear, Kayla, the steel and aluminum tariffs, those will remain in effect until they are officially resolved?
That is what we understand. The White House put those in place for Europe just on June 1st. Europe had been exempt initially because some of these negotiations were going on. And the two biggest priorities for the European Union in coming to Washington today, number one, to get those steel and aluminum tariffs to be rolled back for Europe, and number two, to keep any new auto tariffs from being put in place. It would seem that they were able to win both of those items.
All right, Kayla, thank you. Kayla Tausche in Washington. So given these developments, simple question tonight. Is Trump winning the trade war? Guy?
Is Trump winning the trade war? Well, the market seems to indicate that the President Trump in the United States is winning the trade war right now, right? Our market's effectively unchanged. Chinese markets, despite the rally, is still down probably 15 to 16%. So if you look through that lens, yeah, I guess we are winning the trade war. I'm not certain there are winners at the end of the day, but given the context of your question, our market seems like it wants to take out the highs we made in January. So the things we talk about in the market, and given that spectrum, we are winning, yes.
Well, and if you think about what's accompanied this, we've had comments about the Fed, we've had comments about the dollar, we've had comments about some of the places where the economy actually was most concerned. So in other words, we pushed back on the Fed. Right now, it looks like we're getting 3 hikes, not 4 in 2018. You've got a dollar that was a runaway train, but now is absolutely failed at 95. So at a time when we're getting largely fantastic earnings, we're looking like we want to chase or trace or retrace, whatever you want to say. 2876 on the S&P is right around the corner.
You know, we're winning. I would say we are winning. Have we won? No, because I think this is the very earliest stages, so that would be way too premature to say something like that. But the markets itself, I think, speak for themselves. I mean, the reactions that we've seen, and we're starting to see the reactions in terms of the earnings themselves. I love the fact that we have focused. The financials came out. Look at who outperformed last week. It was the financials. And then you look through, and now we're getting more and more towards not just the industrials.
That was because of the steepening yield curve, though.
Well, I think that there's no doubt about that. I mean, that helped, but they also produced numbers that I think everybody looked at and said, you know what, these are pretty daggone good numbers. And the industrials have looked a little bit better. And take a look not just at FANG, because that's what we always focus on, but how about the fact that today we see Microsoft leading the Dow? How about if we see Cisco? Some of the other names, old names, including Intel, throw in a Micron. There are names that outside of FANG are working right now.
I mean, for there to be no further escalation, let me put it that way, with Europe. That's a win for the markets.
It totally is. I mean, listen, but I'm not sure the markets are the proper lens to think about it. You know, when we think about like autos was one of the most heavily affected by this kind of tit for tat with Europe. When you think about, you know, the president used to talk about like the German automakers. He was talking about it just yesterday. You know, BMW has their largest factory here in South Carolina. So when you think about what those tariffs mean, and they export them obviously to Europe, to Asia, to all over the place, you know, a 25% tariff really puts our workers at risk. And that's why it's actually really important. I'm just saying it's very complicated. So I don't know if the market is the best lens. I think that if this thing were to not kind of play out as a win right here, if they don't settle this with Europe, then we know that we still have to do Canada. We still have to do Mexico. Those are massive trading partners for us. We think about this $380 billion trade deficit we have with China. You know, it's much bigger. We trade much more with our border partners here. So this is just one step here. And, you know, the president calling Europe our foe last week when he was in Europe, this is the easiest one for him to kind of get a win here, I think, personally, because that was the leverage he was trying to use.
Well, I mean, look, Juncker, he was not backing down coming into this. I mean, he said stuff like these tariffs are stupid. He said we need to talk to each other, not at each other, et cetera, et cetera. And let's face it, if nothing gets done, I'm not sure we're going to have this kind of a commentary. But what we're pointing out here is if the U.S. has been aggressive in the face of what have been, let's call them disadvantaged trade relationships across the world, and now there's conversations where they're going to improve, and there are no tariffs that ultimately go through, it's a great deal. If now we're subsidizing soy farmers and American people are actually paying for that, it's not a good trade.
Listen, Dan makes a good point. The market's probably not the best lens, but this show is tasked with talking about the market. So for the function of this show, that's really the only lens that I should really talk about. I mean, frankly, I'm not qualified to talk about the market, as you know, over the last 11 years, but I'm definitely not qualified to look at it through a geopolitical lens. But in terms of the market, I mean, look, you see what's going on here today specifically. On a day where the market could have easily been down, S&P closes up significantly, Dow's up 200 points.
And let's just see, I mean, the lens today was very clear. Where were we right when that news sort of broke, that this is starting to maybe start to get worked through? We went from being down, 50, 70 points, something like that, to 150 points to the upside. So there was reaction. Right or wrong, there was a reaction to what they were seeing.
You know, I'll say this. You got to give it to him. If this works out, let's say we settle it with Europe. We do NAFTA the way that he would like to, and everyone would. And then the Chinese thing resolves itself, and he really did use the 30% gains that he had this is going back to the markets, okay, in the U.S. stock market to kind of negotiate a difficult situation. And we get the trade deals that everybody feels good about, that it's genius.
Is Dan patting our president on the back?
No, I don't think he's quite going that far. But
he said if.
But
what I'm saying is,
I don't
think anybody likes the way that he's gone about it. I think there's ways in diplomatic manners that don't piss off everybody around them to do this. And so, but if it works out, it's a big if.
We can't prove the negative, though. We can't say that if you had used diplomatic means, the outcome would have been the same or would have been better or whatnot.
His argument is that we've been trying to do that for 50 years unsuccessfully. I mean, that's why the man was elected president to a large extent. You know, he will say, we've tried to do it your way for 50 years. Let's try to do it my way. And regardless of what you think about him and his administration, his way appears to be working.
For now.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.